import dependency, lowers costs through localized productions, creates quality jobs, and boosts demand for locally made components like battery and control systems. So what are we saying here is, given the opportunity or the strategic opportunity in e-mobility, as Kenya, we can actually leverage on the assembly and manufacture within the ecosystem. We can start with the supply base, basically development of parts. Then we can move to the lead farms where we have the assembly and manufacture of the EVs. The other one is renewable energy advantage. Kenya's renewable energy dominance gives it a strong advantage in producing green vehicles powered by clean energy. The other one is domestic and regional market. And you'll realize as we progress within domestic and regional market, as a government, through the State Department for Industry, there's a lot that we are doing in terms of policy to actually enable creation of this market. So Kenya's urban growth and transport demand creates a strong local market for EVs, while local production can position the country as a regional manufacturing hub under AFCFTA. So what are the government policy and incentives supporting local EV manufacturing? So we have two main. We have the legal notices and we have the draft automotive bill. So the government of Kenya has made deliberate policy shifts to integrate electric vehicles into the national automotive and industrial development agenda. So key among these are the legal notice LN84 of 2022 and LN112 of 2023. So these two initially did not include EVs. And last year, they were amended and now include EVs. They were submitted to the National Treasury, and I think public participation was gazetted. So, and I think it was completed. So currently we are waiting the official gazettement of the two legal notices. The other one is the draft automotive bill. The upcoming automotive bill will establish a legal framework for the EV sector, setting local content rules, incentives, and standards while ensuring long-term stability and fair competition. So remember, it's draft, so it's currently awaiting public participation at the ministry level. So we also have fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. We are talking of tax breaks, duty remission, special economic zones, and subsidized land. So EV manufacturers can benefit from preferential government procurement, especially for e-buses and utility vehicles used in public services. Other non-fiscal support includes fast tracking, licensing, access to industrial land, and inclusion in national R&D initiatives focused on energy storage, smart mobility, and green manufacturing. So what is the infrastructure and capacity building initiatives? Kenya is investing in enabling infrastructure such as industrial parks, automotive testing facilities, and localized logistic corridors. The Naivasha Special Economic Zone, Konza Technopolis, and the Thika-based, KVM at Thika are being positioned to host vehicle assembly lines, component production units, and related services. So in terms of infrastructure, when it comes to assembly, we actually have KVM, we have AVA, we have Isuzu, and at KVM and AVA, they're actually doing contract assembly, meaning that we have a base for the assembly of, and just the other day, there was a professor from South Africa called Professor Barnes, and he was actually excited to hear that in Kenya, we have a model where an assembler can actually be able to develop different brands of vehicle, like it happens at AVA. So there's contract assembly in Kenya, and you can actually leverage that. So moreover, the government is strengthening human capital for the e-mobility sector by aligning TVET curricula with industry needs, focusing on EV mechanics, battery technology, and digital diagnostics. Partnerships with private investors, academia, and international development agencies are helping build a pipeline of skilled workers, technicians, and engineers critical to a thriving local EV manufacturing ecosystem. And when you look at the automotive bill, you will realize that it talks about creation of an automotive council, which will oversee the different key pillars within the bill. And that will enhance actually the automotive sector in the country. So building Kenya's EV manufacturing ecosystem. Pioneering firms such as Rome, we have the representative of Rome, Hans, and Basigo are establishing assembly lines for electric buses, motorcycles, and utility vehicles tailored to local needs. These initiatives are not only introducing innovative transport solutions, but are also sourcing parts locally, creating skilled jobs, and driving. Okay, what's happening? My TV seems to want to turn off. So we're talking about the initiatives that are not only introducing innovative transport solutions, but also sourcing of parts locally, creating skilled jobs, and driving knowledge transfer in electric drivetrain technologies, battery integration, and digital vehicle management systems. So public-private collaborations has also been key in piloting locally assembled EVs within public transport and logistics sectors, demonstrating their viability in Kenya's terrain and climate. Additionally, partnerships with development agencies and financiers are unlocking green financing to support small and medium manufacturers in scaling up production. These early successes are a strong foundation on which we can build a robust and inclusive e-mobility manufacturing ecosystem. So what are the key enablers? We have 14 key enablers that have been listed. But what is important is we are talking about how can we be able to create a good supply base, how can we be able to create a good lead farm, that is the process, and how do we approach the market. In terms of the supply base, we can talk of the incentives that the government could actually offer the private sector, because this is private-led, in actually developing the supply to the lead farms. You know, we are talking of local sourcing. For instance, at Isuzu, NMC actually sources them with local parts, some of the local parts. So that is one way. So, and raw materials, they should be able to access raw materials with incentives. We have manufacturers or assemblers, manufacturers like Rome and assemblers like AVA, KVM, and Isuzu, who actually get CKDs at, with incentives within the country. So now within the process, the industry is supposed to advise the policies that are going to enhance the process and also ensure that there is a conducive climate. When we're talking about the market, there are initiatives that can be able to help Kenya create a market for new vehicles. We could talk of reducing of age limits, yeah, from 8 to 5 and maybe gradually from 5 to 3 and so forth. And this is actually going to create a market for new vehicles, locally assembled new vehicles. And so with that, I would want to thank you and tell you that Kenya is ready to build electric, Kenya is ready to build the electric assembly hub. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for that. And that leads us to our next session. All our panelists here. So everybody in the room is wondering why were you selected here, and how can we find business opportunities, how to get financing, how do capital markets work. So maybe in a nutshell, what does your company do or your organization, and how can everybody in the room benefit from that?
Good morning. My name is Joseph Wabogo, and thank you very much for the introduction and for your presentation. Yeah. So I work for an organization called Eco Securities, which is a global carbon developer. And I think in the course of this presentation, we are going to understand more of who is a carbon developer and how they, intersect with the e-mobility sector and other sustainable projects that are, that exist globally, including, energy projects as well as land-based projects and forestry. So why I am here is to speak about the opportunity of additional finance, and I put additional in bold because carbon financing is literally additional finance that, of course, is not mandatory to have, but it is good to have because it is a kind of incentive that is given to sustainable projects or sustainable businesses for the fact that they are doing good to the environment. Why the discussion around carbon credits is important at this point is due to the fact that, it is time-bound. If you follow the development of carbon credit standards, methodologies, and eligibility factors, it is required that for a project to be eligible, that technology should not have a more than 5% penetration rate within that country that we are talking about. For instance, if we are talking about carbon credits for renewable energy sector, then the contribution of renewable energy into our national grid mix should not be more than 5%. So if it exceeds 5%, then it is seen as a common practice, and then, it is automatically not eligible. So why this discussion is important for the e-mobility sector is because from the numbers that were presented to us yesterday and today, we have seen that EV vehicles are still a small percentage compared to the total number of vehicles we have on the road. But if the momentum accelerates, then we have more than 5% of the electric vehicles on road in Kenya. Unless standards and carbon methodologies evolve, then they might be deemed to be a common practice, and hence it might not have access to carbon finance. So at Eco Securities, we support, organizations, governments globally, as well as the private sector, first of all, understand carbon markets, as well as to participate. So we have 3 fields of intervention. We do policy advisory work and capacity building on matters of carbon credits. We also support in the technical work, the actual, feasibility studies, registration, analyzing the financial viability, and also supporting in the commercialization of those carbon credits. For the EV environment is very unique, and we are going to discuss the dynamics and the experiences that we have gathered from similar projects elsewhere in the globe, because we are available in all the continents. So thank you very much, and I look forward to having this conversation with you.
Thank you. Mr. Julius?
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for having us here today. This is quite an interesting day for us because we started the journey about 3 years ago with KPLC in regards to EV mobility. So my name is Julius Opio, a board director at the International Chamber of Commerce. We are an affiliate of the International Chamber of Commerce headquartered in Paris, and I also chair the Environment and Energy Commission in Kenya. As ICC, and I'm referring to the ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, and not the other one that you're thinking of. We drive global policy discussions on behalf of private sector. We have over 45 million companies that are members of the ICC, and we are represented in 175 countries across the world. So e-mobility was one initiative we started with about 2-3 years ago. And we worked with stakeholders in Kenya, did a submission to the government of Kenya, to the National Assembly, and we got it passed and approved in 2023, and it took a life of its own. And we are very glad to see what has happened in regards to the success stories we have in Kenya, which is now even becoming success stories for Africa. So Kenya has taken the lead in that front. In the International Chamber, we have quite a number of policies. We look at e-mobility is one of them, renewable energy, sustainable finance, carbon pricing, and we have a long list under climate action and business sustainability. But for today, I'll focus our discussion mainly on e-mobility, And also e-mobility, it's also good to realize that we also have biofuels. When it comes to low carbon emissions, we have biofuels technology that is also being considered. We have clean cooking also initiatives and the same framework. So there's a lot happening, and I would like to say that now the future is also now in the four-wheelers. We're looking at trucks. How can we go into electrification of trucks, focusing on the logistics sector in Kenya, Kenya being a strategic country with a port that serves the region. So we're seeing there's an opportunity in that regard. And my colleague here talked about local assembly. We also think, yes, that's another area we need to look into in terms of investments and opportunities in the country. I think we'll also discuss the grid system under KPLC when you look at the distribution, transmission, and power generation, which we need to look at to see how can it address and support electric mobility in Kenya. And I would also like to request the audience to realize e-mobility is quite wide. Also for the manufacturing sector, we're looking at things like forklifts. How do we use electric forklifts in manufacturing, in logistics? We're looking at shunting logistics in Mombasa with KPA and this kind of services. With those few remarks, that's all I have to say now. For now, thank you.
Thank you. Engineer Maurice, you'll allow me to pass you over since you said quite a bit. So Hans, do tell us what KAM is doing.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to be here. I'm Hans. I'm representing the EV subsector at Kenya Association of Manufacturers. By raise of hands, who knows the Kenya Association of Manufacturers? Okay, relatively okay. So it's an association representing the manufacturing companies in Kenya, over 14 sectors with 1,500 members. And the goal is by 2030 to have 20% contribution of the GDP in Kenya of the manufacturing sector. Over the past decade, it went from 13% to 7%. So it's quite a challenge ahead. But I think that's where electric mobility is very exciting. I think the PS of Energy already mentioned it. There's a $3 trillion being redesigned. And we see a shift from Europe, the US, and other regions to China at the moment. But also a shift in electric mobility with East Africa. And Kenya, I think it's mentioned a couple of times already, is really leading the way in this sector. So that's really exciting. And Engineer Maurice already mentioned it. What KAM does is trying to facilitate manufacturing and assembly companies in this space by setting policy. So for example, working on the legal notice 112 and 84. And briefly, that's, I think, a very exciting success story. During Kibaki's period, excise duty for motorcycles was lowered, and there was a very high uptake of motorcycles, two-wheelers, up to about 300,000 coming to market per year. That's a $30 billion annual market, so that's very sizable. And then the legal notices came and prescribed a number of parts that should be made locally to get some fiscal incentives. And now those parts are available at cost and quality. And that's the type of work that Kenya Association of Manufacturers does. Get industry together, set those long-term roadmaps to create that stable environment. And then what KAM does as well is help companies navigate the often quite complex fiscal environment. Duty remission scheme, for example, is very complex. So those are some of the things that KAM does. Happy to talk about some of the things later on.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to divide this. We are going to start with the carbon markets and then just allow the local opportunities and then the regulatory opportunities. So from carbon markets, keep it short. You told us it's an additional finance opportunity. And everyone in the room, as they've been speaking earlier, they've just been saying part of the problem is shortage of capital in different areas, whether from our charging infrastructure and all that. And the private sector has been very instrumental in really pushing for that together with the government. So what are carbon markets in short? You also mentioned a time restriction. How do we ensure that people make use of that early before it becomes, what is the term you used? More common practice. So how do we do that?
Thank you very much for that question again. And just to emphasize on what is carbon markets and how the transactions happen. You know, carbon credits is an international commodity, but it is produced from the fact that emissions have been removed from the environment, emissions that have already been released. Then you have a project that literally, sucks them out of the environment. And also there is another alternative whereby it's considered emission avoidance. And for the e-mobility sector is an avoidance kind of approach, because we are considering a scenario whereby instead of using an ICE vehicle that would otherwise burn fossil fuel, you are now, utilizing electricity that is coming from a more renewable source. So what we do as carbon credit developers is that we support in the technical work of doing the estimations and the calculations according to the guidelines provided by the various international standards. So there is Vera, Gold Standard, and the rest. So we do calculate, given the cleanliness of the Kenyan grid, or otherwise the source of energy that you use to charge your vehicle. If you are using solar panels, then the avoidance of emissions would be equivalent to the amount of carbon dioxide that could have been emitted by an equivalent internal combustion engine vehicle. But if you are using charging from electricity from the grid, then in that case we will consider what is the grid emission factor and to what extent is our grid renewable. So we support you by doing that, and at the end of the day we will come up with a number of carbon credits that each vehicle or each bike or each bus will be able to generate, and then we show you a financial model that projects the revenues in the short term and in the long term. So the advantage of pursuing this right now does not necessarily mean that you have to start uptaking the process, but it just reminds you on the necessary steps that you need to develop your project or your business, so that when it comes time when you have a relevant scale that supports the cost and it's financially beneficial, then you will be aligned from the beginning to the end. So in terms of the revenue potential, to be honest, it's a bit disappointing for the e-mobility, and I think that's why the process of carbon registration uptake by the EV companies has been a bit slow, because when you look at the level of investment per vehicle, starting from an e-bicycle, an e-bike, four-wheeler, or the buses, compared to the amount of carbon credits you get per equivalent vehicle, it's a bit disappointing compared to other sources of carbon credits. For instance, if you consider an electric bike, from our estimation, depending on the various sources of energy and how clean they are, you could get from maybe 1 to 4 carbon credits per motorbike. And if you get the best rates in the market right now, probably you could sell them at an average of $10 per carbon credit. So meaning that an electric motorbike will give you maybe $40 per annum, which is not negligible. It's something, but it's not as much compared to the many thousands of dollars that have been put forward to acquire that asset. If you look for equivalent carbon credits coming, let's say, from cook stoves, a cook stoves will be sold for maybe $30, but then that cook stove is generating more credits than an electric vehicle that is costing thousands of dollars. So for that reason, there is need to have relevant, I would say, larger scale of vehicles or larger scale of projects that we are putting together, and a lot of single individual companies might not be able to meet the scale that is required for that project to be commercially viable. So for that case, as Eco Securities, we have supported some companies to come together in an aggregation platform whereby each company in its own unique scale contributes to a larger volume that makes a project more commercially relevant, and then there is cost sharing, and then we are able to, to also bring in other investors into building that platform. So we have already developed such a program in Indonesia for the two-wheelers. Indonesia is, a country that has dynamics that are close to similar like Kenya, and then their population is quite high, and they use a lot of two-wheelers so much. So we have already created what we call a program of activity there, and the aim is to bring on board as many two-wheeler companies, each with their own scale, and then they contribute to one big program that shares the costs that could have been borne otherwise by a single entity. So that's what we are looking to build. In Kenya, we are already in touch with several e-mobility companies, and right now we are assessing their scale to see how much we can achieve and what would be the equivalent cost for carbon asset development. Because for those people who have done some simple assignments, it's quite expensive. So it is in the tunes of like $200,000 for you to get your first carbon credit issued. So it's a long process, but also very expensive. So we need scale that supports all those costs and then leaves margin for the owners of these companies to pass down to the end users. Thank you.
Scale, scale, scale. Okay, so my people are hearing. I'm hoping that the associations will scale, aggregate, and scale. So over to, I'd start first with Cam. In terms of local business opportunities, what currently exists for both batteries, chargers? What are we looking at? What is the sector looking at?
Thank you for the question. So maybe can I shortly answer on the carbon as well?
Yes, please.
Because I think what's exciting is that Kenya has just signed the bilateral agreement. Yes. So for me, carbon is always a bit intangible. I don't know if people have the same, but buying a carbon offset or in that voluntary market, it's a bit intangible. So very happy that now the compliance market is coming in, because also the prices are much better at $40, $50, $60 per ton. So I think that's very positive, especially as the upfront cost of manufacturing electric vehicles is a bit higher. And that's maybe a link to the business opportunity. What we see with local manufacturing and assembly is that it is an investment upfront. So it requires an investment in owning the design of components, owning the tooling, and being able to work either internally or with contract manufacturers like KVM or AVA. In the two-wheeler space, we have Car in General and Autopax. We're also here at the exhibition space. And they're doing great work. They're enabling people to come to Kenya and to start assembling. And I think that's where the legal notices come in, is that to take that first risk off of the investment. What we do see is that if you go through that cycle, which is between a 2 and 5 year cycle to start that localization journey, then you lower that cost and you can actually reach price parity of an electric vehicle. And because of the lower operational cost, so per kilometer an electric vehicle is 90% cheaper or more affordable to run. So if you can lower that upfront cost to the same price as a fossil vehicle, then the business case is very strong. And we see that operators need that upfront cost to come down. And that's where local assembly and manufacturing has the highest impact, because you can keep the same quality and then lower the cost much more. And I think macroeconomically what's very exciting is that it creates a lot of jobs. Manufacturing Africa did a study on the 4 categories of local value addition. So from importing fully built units where you have no local value addition, to semi-knockdown kits, which is similar to fully built units. It's mostly done for shipping. And then CKD, so you ship a completely knockdown kit, which is all the parts separate. And then you start adding some local value, and then going into component manufacturing. And I think that's actually where the most excitement is, especially for Kenya, because we have a relatively mature automotive sector. Companies like Isuzu and others have paved the way. And now electric mobility companies are coming in. I just spoke to Kiri on the exhibition space, and they're localizing some parts, and I know many other companies are doing the same. And that's available. So we have component manufacturing for two-wheelers available with companies like MCI and Zen Auto and Pipeman. And then in the bus space also, we have a lot of bus body builders. So Kenya has a really mature bus body manufacturing industry. So you can actually localize about 40 to 50% of the bus already. And then on the batteries, I think that's an interesting question. I think all of the EV companies will share this view. I think with the critical minerals being available in sub-Saharan Africa, there is a huge opportunity to start localizing the batteries. But it requires a technical capacity and economies of scale and a competition with mainly China, which is, yeah, we already heard it, economies of scale. It's challenging, right? Like if we look at two-wheelers, for example, there's 4 million motorcycles coming to market across sub-Saharan Africa, which is a very fragmented market. And AFCTA is trying to harmonize that, but Even policy within Kenya is sometimes very challenging, let alone if we need to understand that across the continent. And there's 25 million motorcycles coming to market in India every year. So comparatively, Sub-Saharan Africa is a relatively small market. So if we want to go upstream into critical minerals processing and these type of things, I do think we need a different approach. And one of the things that is often not mentioned is we need to work together with China on this. So we were very happy to see government led by Ambassador Ali Mohammed go to China and President Ruto. And I think those type of things are really what we need to start localizing more and putting Kenya and Sub-Saharan Africa not so much as an import market, but as a partner to develop upstream because of that job creation and because of the fiscal income. We need the fiscal income and we need the jobs.
Thank you. So I'll go over to Julius. Based on what he said in terms of our market size and everything that exists, and you also mentioned that there's more to electric mobility other than just what we know. What is happening in that space from either a regulatory perspective or even from a financing perspective? What market exists? What should the companies do to be getting ready?
I think there's an opportunity for us to relook at our charging infrastructure with the various stakeholders we have when it comes to power, generation, transmission, and distribution to incorporate the various users, so whether it's a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, or four-wheeler. But also we need to look at our economic sectors. So what strategic economic sectors do we have as a country, like Kenya? So we are very good in agriculture, so we know what we export. We know we are number one in coffee, tea, and other cash crops like even macadamia. Now we need to ask ourselves, what is the opportunity when it comes to electrification of transport? So one opportunity we've seen is that Kenya is a hub, a logistics hub, and we serve the region, and we have the infrastructure to support the region under ICE transport systems. So an opportunity is for us now to see how do we move to electrification, looking at trucks, trams, rapid transport systems within the cities, and come up with a strategy in that regard. So the business cases we are looking at that can possibly get financing is, for example, if you're going to do an investment in Nairobi, should it be an AC or a DC infrastructure that you're going to invest in for fast charging or slow charging, depending on the user? But there has to be a strong business case that supports that. And going back to what my colleagues said here earlier on, it's all about scale. So if you have a good business model and you can scale, then you are easily able to get finance. So it could be, in this case, I'm referring to sustainable financing models that are available. That's one. Number two is in terms of infrastructure, because infrastructure is expensive, we need to consider PPP initiatives. And that is why it's very important. And I think what KPLC has done is quite critical, because when you talk about power distribution, there has to be a KPLC component in it. And using that now, we can have a PPP model developed. Okay. So another thing we're looking at, I would like to talk about a project in regards to what is being done between Mombasa and Nairobi. So we're not looking at just a road transport system. We're looking at an electric infrastructure system that's going to be built along the expressway. So these are some of the regulatory requirements we can come up with when Kenha, Kura, and all these institutions that are building roads build infrastructure. There has to be an electric charging component that is incorporated into the design with partners and stakeholders like KPLC, it could be KenGen, Ketraco, and that kind of thing. And then the private sector now, we are able to come in and say, yes, we can do a PPP, make an investment that actually gives, that has an ROI return or an IRR return that is acceptable to us, whether it's 5 years, 6 years, or 10 years, and we become a shareholder in that initiative. The third aspect is also to bring the community to own these assets, because sometimes a lot of investment is done, but the communities don't feel that they own their assets and they're not involved. So if we come up with models whereby using the pension funds that are available, we go through the institutions to have them invest in this infrastructure, and then they are guaranteed of returns without any risk or minimal risk, we have a lot of a well-designed pension fund in Kenya and companies. If you look at the insurance sector, mutual funds, it's quite big. And the only place they're able to invest most of that money is in the Nairobi Securities Exchange. So the opportunity now is when it comes to sustainable finance, is how do we come up with models like this when it comes to electric vehicles, low carbon emission initiatives, to bring in funding, local funding from the pension funds, mutual funds, which are within ourselves. And then now, we can even now go to external international funders like DFIs and international investors to come on board. What I would like to say is that we are strategically placed as a country today to drive the electrification, because over 90% of our energy is clean compared, let's say, to South Africa, or whereby they have a coal, a big chunk of their energy is not clean. So, and as a result of that, we're able to now get the benefits in regards to our investments. My colleague talked about carbon finance and carbon pricing. But for us, I think we're miles ahead. If we do these investments, I think we would be liable and eligible to get carbon funding and carbon pricing benefits, because our infrastructure currently has that opportunity for us to invest, and not only to serve Kenya, but also to serve the region. So if you look at Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan, they're all relying on us in regards to our infrastructure to get goods into their countries. And we also have an elaborate port in Mombasa that they're also looking at electrification of some of their systems and equipment to incorporate e-mobility. Thank you.
Thank you. I like that. I'm hearing local funding and pension, and now it's starting to take shape. You know, the carbon credits are good and everything, but like you say, they're expensive to get. So now to the State Department, with all this that is being spoken about, how can you support us when it comes to ensuring that there's penetration beyond just regulation? Because I'm hearing other people saying there's funding here, there's funding there. As a State Department, what other funding models exist that can drive this sector that you think is something companies should tap into now?
Thank you. First of all, let me say that the role of the State Department, or rather the role of the government as a whole, is actually to create an enabling environment for the industry. And as I said earlier, we need to look at the different stages within the supply chain, or rather within the ecosystem. So we need to look at, number one, the supply base, number two, the lead farms, number three, the market. Now, what can we do? And of course, in the market, we also need to look at the infrastructure that actually supports the market for what is being produced by the lead farms. So in terms of number one, infrastructure, I feel like it is important to prioritize e-mobility infrastructure in the public investment management guidelines. I think that priority alone is first of all going to create a base. Yesterday I saw people were actually doing a poll where they were stating, and I think in the poll, there are two things that came out very well. Number one is for e-mobility to actually thrive, we need the infrastructure. Number two is we need policies that actually create the right environment. So one of them is, I think, is the prioritization. The other one is now at the supply base, how can we give tax breaks? How can we give incentives so that so that what the lead farm is producing is more competitive? In Kenya currently, we're actually importing a lot of second-hand vehicles. And as industry, our promotion is mostly on how do we create value, not just bringing fully built or semi-knockdown kits. We're talking about how can we create value within Kenya. So one is to create incentives for parts that lead farms actually use, and for raw materials for suppliers, those who create the supply base for the lead farms, so that the final product is competitive in the market. Okay? And we've done that through the legal notices. Legal notice 84 for four-wheelers and three-wheelers, and legal notice 112 for two-wheelers. Then the other one is we need to enhance our skill force. We need to ensure that we have technology transfer. So I think Rome Electric can attest to this. As State Department for Industry, before we can actually recommend you to the National Treasury to actually get the incentives, we actually visit your farm or your industry and ensure that you have Africans, Kenyans working there to ensure that we have a tech transfer within the nation so that we can have our own personal investments. It is good to know that at Rome, you actually sent an African to even go and work at Tesla. Yeah, at some point early when you started. So we need to ensure that we have that, and the automotive bill actually creates that platform. The automotive bill talks about creation of an automotive institution that is actually going to train the young workforce into actually having the skill. And it is important that the industry, especially in the e-mobility sector, to come in and ensure that within the institute they are well represented, so that we have that workforce within the institute. I think a combination of several things will actually create that enabling environment for the e-mobility sector in the country.
Thank you. Enabling environment, that's what we're taking from this. So with regards to enabling environment, and this one is an open question to all of you, there has been an emphasis at the city center, and that being Nairobi, CBD, with all this. How and what is the plan? How are we going to get out to the rural areas? How are we going to expand to this section so that e-mobility doesn't remain a capital city initiative? What do you think? Yes, you can go first.
Yes, for us, one area I think an opportunity stands is mini-grids, microgrids, and systems. How can private sector participate and partner with KPLC when it comes to investing in mini-grid systems? So looking at mini-grid, you can have one in a city and you can also have them in remote locations. That is one. Another area, an opportunity, is the upgrading of the distribution system, make it smart, a smart grid, and we integrate it into electric vehicles and transport systems. And electric vehicles, I mean, we have two-wheelers, three-wheelers, but you also have public transport in terms of trams, trains. The government is doing a project in Konza that is going to connect Konza into Nairobi. They have an elaborate transport system which can actually be electrified. So this private sector can come in as a PPP, a partner with KPLC in that regard. Another area is the EV grid load balancing application tools and solutions, because much as we're talking about electric vehicles, we also need to balance the load on our distribution system so that we don't have blackouts and fires in this regard. Also in terms of infrastructure, when it comes to infrastructure development on roads, I'd mentioned that earlier. I think power generators, companies or utility companies can also play an investment role when it comes to the infrastructure. So the construction of roads, expressways, should not just be left to one entity in the government. We bring in other partners. So maybe from energy sector, we have we have biofuels that we're looking at that can also come in and invest in some of this infrastructure. And then we make it a smart, green infrastructure that now serves all the various stakeholders, and e-mobility would be one of them to serve.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think my remarks will echo close to what he has said, because one of the biggest challenges of, I would say, rural electrification, as I heard from a mini-grid event, is that when these distributed systems are built in rural areas, as you have mentioned, they are not very profitable because the rate of power consumption is very low. In rural areas, you'll find that people use electricity simply for lighting. And if you are a mini-grid developer and you have put up maybe a 100 kilowatt off-grid project, you will find that the households that are buying that power from you at the end of the day, they are paying you very little amount of money. So when this e-mobility is coupled Now, when the off-grid and distributed systems are coupled with the e-mobility and clean cooking, then it will also enhance value for the mini-grid developers and people who are building renewable energy projects in isolated areas that are not covered by the grid. But all in all, I see a lot of similarities between what I spoke earlier with regard to carbon credits and financing for e-mobility, as well as for the distributed renewable sector. So just to give a quick comparison, a lot of off-grid players that do solar lanterns, distributed systems, solar home systems, and household solar, a lot of them actually have been left out of the carbon markets for a very long time, because traditionally carbon credits have been for the big players. If you did not have a megawatt scale of a project, then you are not feasible. And then it took quite a long time before people start now thinking of how can competitors aggregate their scales and pursue carbon credit together. So, and that's the reasoning that we want to bring to the e-mobility sector as early as now, because the space will be very competitive. What was mentioned yesterday is that we have over 80 e-mobility companies. Probably a lot of them will operate at a scale that is not feasible for carbon for a long time. But how do you take advantage of whatever scale you have and make sure that you access the carbon finance as little as it is, but you know, it's additional income to whatever other sources that you have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So over to regulatory frameworks. I'm grateful for the legal notices that are currently happening. What other frameworks, or are there any other laws that we're pushing for that is going to enable businesses to operate better in these sectors? And also, are there any regulatory frameworks, legal notices to push this knowledge of electric mobility also to, I wouldn't call them rural, but beyond just the city centers, to ensure that everybody is included in this e-mobility agenda?
Now, thank you for that question. At the State Department for Industry, there are a number of regulations and bills that we are pushing for that is going to create an enabling environment for businesses, especially businesses, because after the lead farms produce whatever they are producing, they need a market for their product. One of them is the industrialization policy. We have an industrialization policy that was developed in 2022, but we are currently working on a draft industrialization policy that is going to run from 2025 to 2035. And actually the goal of the industrialization policy is to modernize Kenya's economy through inclusive industrial growth, green transition, innovation, and job creation. We are talking about how can we create high value industries in the global value chain. So, and it's talking about several things, one of them being streamlining regulatory and physical environment. Yesterday I had someone talk about the way the business environment is not predictable. Yeah, because every now and then we have policies, or rather we have tax that are introduced that makes it very hard for you to budget in the next in your next financial business year. So the industrialization policy and the Business Amendment Act 2024 is actually going to help streamline the regulatory and fiscal environments. So how is it going to do so? It is going to do so by harmonizing licensing and taxes across counties. That if at some point I attended the Business Barometer report launch, and one of the biggest complaints was that, there is no harmony in licensing and taxes within the different counties. So the Business Amendment, the Business Act 2024, which is the Amendment Act, and the Industrialization Policy, which we are currently developing with Tony Blair Institute, is going to actually create a better environment also for the EV sector. Because if the industry win, EV is part of the industry. Yeah. So those are two regulations that we are currently working on, apart from the automotive bill itself, the legal notice 84 and 112, which is relevant to this particular sector.
Oh, thank you. That's some good progress. Would you like to add anything? Yes.
Yes, I would like to add. For us, from the business angle, in terms of some of our members, one area we're looking at is the special economic zones, okay, under regulatory frameworks. And we need to figure out how can we unlock these special economic zones so that companies can come in, invest, and scale their manufacturing activities, not for Kenya only, but for Africa. And I would like to ask, how many of us currently in the EV sector are operating under a special economic zone? You see, we have very few of ourselves. And that's a challenge I would like to throw to all of us. As the private sector, how can we come together and we come up with a policy framework which we will present to government such that the EVs or companies that are doing the local manufacturing are able to scale their manufacturing activities for export using the special economic zone. Because it seems a number of us don't have access or we're not knowledgeable about all these incentives that are available in the special economic zones that have been provided at national level and sometimes even at county level. So I think strategically, that is an area we need to look at and see how do we drive more incentives through the special economic zones such that private sector, when they make the investments, they're better able to get a better return and scale their manufacturing activities to the continent.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we are almost coming to a close, and I'm hearing people asking, when it comes to financing ecosystem, and I know that's also larger than this, but when it comes to the financing ecosystem, we're looking at banks, MFIs, venture funds, any form of funds. Is there anything that exists that is ready to support this sector? Because currently it's sounding very sustainable, it's sounding outside there. Are there any local financing ecosystems that are supporting any of the things you do?
So maybe I can comment on that one.
Okay.
Also linking to a few other questions. I think you asked a question on what's an enabling environment. And typically from a CAM point of view, we look at 4 things. So people, power, public and private financing, and policy. And then people, you mentioned it, Maurice. I think here in the room, PS is doing great work from GIZ and Alex Menene. So I think there's a real opportunity to educate. For skills of the future, it's normally called, but I think that future is now. Because today we are hiring battery engineers, R&D engineers, charging infrastructure. So the space is growing fast and hiring a lot of people. So I think that's very exciting. And the training, I think, is going really well in the sector. And that's one of the reasons why the sector is growing so fast. You asked how to enable more hybrid. And I think on the power side, we need to start looking at hybrid charging models and interoperability to expand. And then on the public and private funding, I think it is very exciting. Like we do see a lot of interest from regional and international investors. And as the industry is maturing, it's now 5 to 10 years old, we also see other entities coming in. So banks are starting to come in because they see the assets being de-risked. We see more debt coming into the sector, not only equity. I think equity is still the largest challenge in the sector because people see a risk profile that isn't there. And I think that's, as a sector, that we need to educate, is that especially foreign investors see a risk profile, and which is different than a software company or elsewhere. And I think we need to educate the sector on that actually electric mobility has very strong unit economics, is relatively asset light, and is growing very fast at the moment. So that on the funding side. And lastly, on the policy side, I think there's often a misconception that we need to start importing first to get to scale. We've mentioned that scale is the biggest challenge. And with CAM, we've looked at India, China, and other regions that really adopted electric mobility at scale. And they all had an industrial policy. And I remember Joe from ArcRide saying this, that this is the biggest thing we need, right? We need a long-term, stable policy. And today, it's not there. The financial bill that's now in draft will incentivize importation. And the electric mobility national policy will also incentivize importation. And if that happens, the local assembly and manufacturing sector will not exist, and it won't start existing because it will remain on import. That's what we've seen across the world. So I think what the push is now is to give assembly and manufacturing a chance to create that longer term perspective, to be able to create that enabling environment. And I think you mentioned the legal notices, the automotive bill, and then I think what hasn't been mentioned is the KS 1515. I think one of the things that we need to push for is also emission standards and making sure that not only on the electric mobility side, but also on the fossil fuel side, we create a push and a pull. So I think there's a very exciting opportunity, and we do see investors coming into the space, but what is needed is that long-term perspective in policy, and that's one of the key challenges for the sector at the moment, I would say.
Thank you for that. And so as we close out, your parting shot to the crowd in terms of when you look at business opportunity, financing, carbon markets, what is the one thing that companies can do to be readily aligned? I know you've already mentioned it in different sections, but just now to close out, if there's one thing you'd advise businesses, associations, different players to do to be ready.
Yeah, if I can go first. From Eco-Securities, how we perceive carbon credits, we see it as, as catalytic finance that would help your business unlock other forms of financing. Because from history or from our experiences that carbon financing can barely support your capital investment. Actually, in the best case scenario, probably carbon credits can contribute up to maybe 5% of the capital you need to probably scale. So yeah, so how we see it from our side is that is an opportunity for you to guarantee other investors or other sources of financiers to invest into your business. As it was mentioned earlier, Kenyan landscape has actually evolved in terms of supportive policies and ensuring stabilities on matters of carbon credits regulations. There have been some acts of parliament that have been passed, as well as accompanying regulations. And recently, the government of Kenya signed an implementation agreement for credits transaction with Switzerland. So those kind of mechanisms that have oversight of the government and that guarantees over long-term carbon credits offtake can really support you in unlocking other forms of money into your business. And just for example of Switzerland, they assess projects and then they can support the initial development cost, which I said can be in tunes of maybe $150,000, which is quite a lot of money for startups to support. And then after that, then they can issue offtake guarantee for your project as long as it develops within the agreed criteria. So the development of controlled markets or compliance market is a huge opportunity compared to the voluntary market has dominated the carbon credits for a long time. So our invitation is that whenever you hear discussions around carbon markets, there have been a lot of criticism of the industry, and I think that's why it is evolving to the next level of compliance and high oversight and regulations. So once you hear discussions around it, please approach it with open mind, because it's a global opportunity, and people are pursuing it, governments are pursuing it, so we should all be positioned to see how we fit in, and we would be here to support you in case. Thank you.
Thank you.
My closing remarks is under financing, we could also consider leasing, asset leasing. We have companies that are able to lease electric vehicles. And if you have a transition plan on how you want to transition your fleet from ICE to electric over an agreed period of time, whether it's 10 years, 15 years, there are companies that can come in and support your transition plan and provide leasing equipment. So if you need forklifts in your factory, a logistics company, if you're a trucking business and you want to transition some of your fleets to electric, they will be able to provide the infrastructure and asset leasing solutions. So that's an area you could also consider. And also this could also be extended to KPLC. If you want to lease a big fleet of your ICE vehicles and you want to do a quick transition in the next 5 years, those opportunities exist in terms of transitioning from ICE to electric vehicles. Thank you.
So for me, in terms of financing, what I feel is good that you have with you is that in Kenya we have different institutions that can actually help you get financing. We have KIE, we have ICDC, where you can be able to get cheap loans. We also have agencies that actually give bonds to actually de-risk different investment sectors within the country, which you can also do your research and actually get that information. Also, it is important for the development of local component supplier, for the development of local component supplier development program by the medium small enterprise ministry, because if we can be able to help the small and medium enterprises access finance and actually do local investment, then we can actually be able to grow the industrial sector in the country. So we have KIE, we have ICDC, and we have agencies that actually can help you de-risk your investment within the country.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hans?
Thank you. Closing remarks. So maybe two sides. One for people using electric mobility. By raise of hands, who owns an electric vehicle? I think KPLC as well. So the question would be, or the comment would be, I think we can lead by example. And KPLC has done that really greatly, I think, with procuring the vehicles here in Kenya. So that's been great. So one would be lead by example, and the other would be collaborate. And I think what we are doing here now is really exciting. For the past 6-7 years, having seen the industry grow, and associations like EMAC and supporting with GIZ and KPLC setting up this event, I think this is exactly what we need to do and do more. Collaborate, exchange ideas, and it's really exciting to see how fast the sector is growing. So exciting to see what will happen next year.
Thank you. So I'll open questions to the floor. Please introduce yourself, your name, maybe what you do, and then ask your question to a specific panelist. Okay, I can see a hand there, 2 hands there, 3 hands there. Okay, so I think we'll restrict it. We have about 10 minutes, and then I have to hand over. So let's see where we can start with. We can start with
good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Engineer Rogers Ayemba. I work with the Kenya Power, stationed in Homa Bay. My question goes to the State Department of Industry. I did not hear you mention or talk about the engineer. To be specific, the local engineer. What is the role of the local engineer in this EV manufacturing ecosystem? What are your plans in terms of capacity building for the local engineer? Are there any policies or drives that are going to assist or make the local engineer be in the front line of this sector or this subsector? And another thing is about the end game about all this is people to have electric vehicles. I'm sure here the only problem that people have here is that they don't have money to pay 7.5 million, 6 million to buy an electric vehicle, right? If these vehicles go to 2 or 3 million, half of the people here will walk out here with vehicles. So that is where the conversation should go. So whatever it is that we are doing, these people have money, by the way, but maybe it doesn't get to 7M. So the end game about all this is being able to reduce the price. Be it incentives, collaborations, all these big words that you people are having. The end thing should be the price should go down. See. And now for the local engineer, I don't know, again, are you having any conversations with the engineering bodies, IEK, EBK, in terms of having the engineer at the forefront, the cornerstone of all this? And I wonder why IEK is not here. I don't know if the organizers did not invite them, because this is an engineering thing. This sector is all engineering. I don't see our chairman, Engineer Sharma, here, or the representation of his leadership here. That is an oversight that is a bit worrying, because for the engineer, this is where we are supposed to sit. This is where we are supposed to be. See, we are talking about everything engineering. We're not talking about medicine. Hakuna madaktari hapa. We're talking about engineers. It's an engineering sector. So kindly, thank you.
Yeah.
I think I'll permit the second question, then we answer and then give room for more. Please take it.
Yeah, thank you. Quite a good presentation. So for me, I think, so my name is George Theuri from Practical Action. So listening to the discussion, quite informative. For me, it's only one question. Maybe it's also started being asked. So I look at the cost of money when you speak of local manufacturing. I'm sure majority of the people in the room, if you go to Ampersand, Basigo, for most of the financing, it's more of external capital. But now look at the cost of money, even locally. So will a manufacturer come to set up at 16%, 20% interest rates? It's good that you speak of ICDC, the MSME body, but at what rates will a local manufacturer wanting to set up along the value chain of manufacturing get that money at what cost? Both upstream and also downstream to the person who's buying that EV. Yeah, if you go to purchase an EV at 20%, we need rates of 8%, 5%. Thank you.
All right, so Engineer Maurice, I'll allow you to start. It looks like you're under fire. Let's go.
So on the local engineer, what are we doing in terms of capacity building? So as I said, we have an automotive bill, and the automotive bill is pushing for the creation of an automotive institution and also creation of an automotive council. Now the automotive council, once the bill passes, is going to help those talks between the State Department, the relevant stakeholders, and also the IEK and EBK, the institutions. So the automotive institution is also going to allow for capacity building of the engineers that are out of school in terms of affordability of electric vehicles. Remember, we talked about how the government is taking initiatives of introducing legal notices that give incentives to the raw materials of the lead farms. Now, we have a problem which we need to both to agree that, number one, we have preference for second-hand vehicles and not new vehicles. And new vehicles are not entirely competitive. So the big question is, how can we be able to make new vehicles competitive in Kenya? And I think the answer is simple. Number one, we need to create a supply base for the raw materials of lead farms. And then we need to incentivize the process of the lead farms in creation of the new vehicles so that it is competitive. The question on financing. I talked of KIE, Kenya Industrial Estates. I talked of ICDC. I think that if you just go online and you look for because I've been approached, I think it's 5% to 10% interest rate, I'm not sure, but you need to confirm. But we do have platforms. I think the thing for us is we need to do our research and look at those platforms and actually do our feasibility studies, submit our proposals, and then, see how the process goes. And the door of the State Department is always open. We have what we call duty remission scheme. I think there are people in the e-bike sector who have actually come, and we actually told them that they should form an association and actually, so that we can be able to sit down and develop a proposal for them. But we have duty remission, meaning if you're getting your raw materials for purpose of manufacture, you can actually get incentives. You can be recommended to the National Treasury as an assembler or as a manufacturer within the country. So, yeah, those are the platforms that are there.
Thank you.
Can I comment?
Yes, please.
Maurice just mentioned Esther, and I think she is a great example. She started as an apprentice 3 years ago in this space, and then after 3 years from an apprentice went into a powertrain engineer, and unfortunately went to work at Tesla, but also fortunately because that's, I think, cool in this space. And we do see many Kenyan engineers going to Volvo, Jaguar Land Rover, and other automotive companies. And I do think that one of the most exciting things has been the people, like Kenyan engineers coming out of Kenyan universities and doing amazing work in this sector. So I think maybe not as visible, and it should definitely be more visible, but that's really what's driving this sector. The talent in Kenya has just been astounding, so that's really cool. And on the localization question, like if we look at a frame, for example, for a motorcycle, if you order a frame through an intermediary, so you don't own the design, it's about $100. Then you have to ship it for $90, and you pay $60 in tax. So that's $250 for a landed cost of a frame. If you were to do it in-house, you would pay about $50 to $60 for the frame and no shipping. And through the incentives in Kenya, you wouldn't pay any taxes. So that's a huge cost saving. So I think the challenge there is that it takes about $1.5 million to invest in a setup like that. So you need to produce about 6,000 to 7,000 motorcycles to break even. But with that amount coming to market every month, that's not a problem. So I think it is about investment. So even with investment costs of 10, 15, 20%, it is about a long-term stable environment. And today, if I need to invest that, I don't have visibility that importation won't be incentivized like it is today. So today, importation pays less taxes than manufacturing. And I think that's where the key challenge is. So the cost of financing is not the challenge, I would say. It's the instability in the policy environment, because manufacturing, the business case is actually really strong.
All right, thank you. Seeing more questions. So at this point, I'm being reminded we are running out of time. So I'll allow, one more question, and then I'd hand over the mic back to the MC. One last question, please, at the top.
Good afternoon. George Mwendwa. I'm an engineering student at Nairobi National Polytechnic. Now, you've said, engineer from the State Department, that you've brought this technology and e-mobility studies to the TVET institutions. But what about the ongoing students who are a little bit deep into the whole curriculum? Because, you guys are talking about a lot of complicated stuff, and you might bring all of this stuff into the country and we start putting the infrastructure, right? But then it takes time to train. It takes around 4 to 5 years to train a good workforce, right? And so far, there isn't really a strong workforce that is focused on e-mobility studies, right? So what happens to the current ongoing student who is doing the traditional automotive engineering studies? Is there a way where you can bridge into e-mobility? Is there companies that you can join to train the electric modules and stuff? Thank you.
Okay. Now, for ongoing students, I mentioned that before we approve you, or rather we recommend you to National Treasury as an assembler or a manufacturer, we actually come to your facility and verify that you actually do technology transfer. How do they do technology transfer? Is they offer internship and attachment opportunities to the Kenyan students. Then the other thing is, if you visit the assemblers, so that is one way. If you visit AVA, if you visit Isuzu and KVM and also Rome, you will realize that they actually have an opportunity for attachments and internships. They cannot get incentives without doing that. So that is how we ensure that it's done.
Very short, I am told not to, but with mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, like a regular degree, you're okay. Like there's a lot of people hiring just with regular degrees, so you don't necessarily need like an EV specialization.
Right. So I think that answers it. That the current modules work. Great. So I'll allow us to close with a group photo. I'll be in the room so you can direct all your questions, and then we'll see how, using the various forums, how we can respond to them.
Thank you. Oh, loud of applause for Alice. You know, it's hard being a mad. Yes. It is hard being a midwife. It is so hard. It's not just for the mother. It's really tough, and we are doing this because there's one more session.
Yes.
And because we are live, we want to manage the transition very smoothly. So please clap for Alice. She's done a beautiful job. Stand up for the photo. Alice means the number one, you know. And the name is associated with intelligence, and she has handled it with intelligence. We have Julius, meaning the youthful one. We have Joseph, again, meaning God will add. We have Maurice, means the dark one, from Africa. Yeah. And then we have Hans, means gracious. That's why he's very gracious, adding comments every now and then. Thank you very much. God bless you. To Apigie Makofi, we are going to give you an opportunity to interact with them as we go, because we just want to finish the next section and then we go to the next stage. An announcement: you are all being welcomed out there when we are done to do test drive. Okay? So test drives are open to all of you. Please feel free to do that. Thank you very much. We said that moving is an important thing, okay? So give me a stretched thumbs up. Stretch your hand properly. Okay, with your left hand, do the small pinky finger. Okay? So at the count of one, both hands. No. One pinky, the other one thumb. My goodness. Okay. At the count of one, you exchange so that where there was pinky, there is. Okay, one. Very fast. One. Are you? Thank you very much. You know, while midwifing is difficult, it's also very hard to be interviewed. So the people who are being interviewed are having a hard time, and I don't envy them. My first interview was when I was 6 years old. And it was an interview to graduate from nursery school to class 1. It was a tense moment because being a repeater was a bad thing, even at that stage. If you are a repeater, bad reputation so early. And the interview was very simple. You just needed to move your head to touch the other ear. And I was very small, so I was afraid. At that stage, getting the head to the other ear was really difficult. So it was a tense moment for me. That's why I'm still remembering it today, my first interview. At the moment, let us welcome Faith Koome, engineer, Kenya Power. She handles SCADA, the communication aspect of the National Control Center. Engineer Faith, tumpigie makofi. She is going to be the powerful moderator for the next session. And then when we do the questions, those people who we cut short, we can allow them to ask the questions together at the end of this session. So Faith Koome, tumpigie makofi, engineer, Kenya Power.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Greg. This is a great moment, and it's my honor to take the podium. And coming from a section of discussing the opportunities in Kenya, I believe it's just the right time to go into the skills section. What skills gaps do we have, and how do we afford to avail the resources called skills? And that is us in this room, engineers. So I'll call on stage my panelists. I'll call Piers Wathome of GIZ. Please join me here on stage. I'll call Alex Monene of Advanced Mobility. Please join me on stage. I will call Dan Gombe, representing Dr. Jeremiah Kiplagat of the Institute of Energy Studies and Research from Kenya Power. And I'll also call, last but not least, Jacqueline Kimani of Basigo. And that being it, we will take on our brief before lunch section, where we'll have a presentation moment for each one of the speakers. And then a Q&A for each one of them. And then your questions will also come on board. Please support us by making us see what you might not have seen while preparing for this presentation. Allow me to take my seat, and then I'll welcome Pius to take on the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Pius Wadhome. I'm the e-mobility advisor. I work for GIZ Kenya. I'm really excited about this. So today I have a very good presentation, especially for the engineers, to understand what the platform of e-mobility looks like, what are the training needs, what are the gaps, and how do we close the gaps. Next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so a brief context. The project is called Promotion of E-Mobility in Kenya. And the project has 4 main components, which are really key into making sure that we have a full e-mobility ecosystem in Kenya. So we have policy and regulation and standardizations, where we are working on making sure that we have the right policies, the right standards to bring the right technology in Kenya. Then the second component, which I really focus on, is capacity building, training, and networking. And we've done a lot of training and networks. And just 2 months ago, we actually decided to do women in e-mobility networks, just to make sure that the women or the gender aspect is also part of the conversation. The third component focuses on supporting pilot activities, private sector support, so that you can get access to finance, understanding the ecosystem, and how you can venture into the market. And the fourth one focuses on electrification of mass transportation system, that is BRT, line 3 to be specific. So e-mobility presents a lot of opportunities for the growth of, especially in public transport and freight logistics, and also 2- and 3-wheelers. However, we have challenges that are making e-mobility not to go as fast as we want them. So first, we have the regulatory gaps, and I'm sure we've had a lot of conversation where we were talking about the standards and harmonization of these standards. So we have regulatory gaps, and once we get the regulations right, then we'll be able to adopt and move forward. Then we have a limited charging infrastructure. Of course, now that Kenya Power already committed to doing some more charging infra, that is something that is going to accelerate the adoption of e-mobility. Then now we have shortage of specialized technicians. I know most of us have been through the 844 system, the engineers, and even for the TVET institutions, we don't have a specifically e-mobility curriculum. And that is why GIZ, through and the collaboration with the Kenyan government, decided to do the promotion of e-mobility in Kenya with these pillars, and focusing on the training needs, survey, and understanding how can we fill up the gaps. And the solution is being given by an objective or a study that we're going to do. So the objective of this study, which is ongoing, is to assess the skills requirement and the training gaps in the Kenyan's e-mobility value chain. And then based on this study, it is going to inform us that what is the next step. Now that we have gaps, what can we do? We want to employ something called competence-based education and training, focusing on the skills in the e-mobility sector. Now, how are we conducting these training needs? So we've done project planning phase, already started in March. We've been doing a lot of data collection. I'm sure most of us who are in the space, you've seen survey tools going around just to understand what is the situation is like from the students, the trainers, and also the industry players. We did have a stakeholder engagement where we actually engaged all the stakeholders in the e-mobility sector just to understand how e-mobility looks like on their side. And now this month of May, we are going to conclude the study, and once we have it, we'll be able to publish for the public so that we understand what are the next steps. So when we look at the e-mobility ecosystem, I just want to focus on a very short thing. So to have a complete ecosystem, we know that we have major systems in the EV. The battery itself, charging infrastructure, communications, IoT, and then now the mechanical aspect of the vehicle. Based on this, if we want to get the training needs well, and then now translate the training needs into a curriculum or a training module, we need to understand what is the question that we're asking. Do we need to start and come up with a zero new e-mobility curriculum, or should we do an add-on curriculum? For those who are in TVET, I'm sure those who are doing diploma, we have already a hybrid system in the e-mobility curriculum, automotive engineering level 6. And now, based on the study, already the feedback says that yes, we can do an add-on curriculum, but the best way to do is standalone, so that if you want to specialize in e-mobility, then you are able to actually do something called modular curriculum in the e-mobility sector. So we are looking at the workforce development in the e-mobility in terms of manufacturing and assemblies of the EVs. Then we are looking at maintenance and repairs of the EVs. Then you look at the charging infrastructure, and then now battery management system, and then the emerging technologies or the roles in the e-mobility sector. So the recommendations based on this study, or what we're really looking for, is to develop and implement a standalone curriculum, which is a competence-based curriculum, level 4 and 5. So based on this, when I say level 4 and 5 means diploma and craft certificate level, where you actually do something called dual training. Dual training is a model where you have 50% of your time in the school and 50% of the time you're doing it in the industry, so that there's a continuous connection on the technologies and the changes that are happening. So dual training is a dynamic model that enables the skill transfer in a real-time manner. So I want to explain a small thing on after the training is what happens. So for us to get the skills right and the right training programs right, the skills and gap analysis will tell us now that we're going to standalone curriculum. But what are the steps? So we have to engage the industry players so that we get to understand what are the job descriptions of a battery technician, what is the job description of a charging infrastructure technician, come up with occupational standards, or what describes exactly what they need to do, and then now translate those job descriptions into a curriculum or a training material. So this is a comprehensive thing, and I'm happy that I've had questions on skills. So for us to get this right, we're also engaging the industry to form something called Sector Skills Advisory Council, same with the Automotive Council, so that they can tell us what is happening in the industry. Are we training based on what the industry requires, or are we just training for the sake of, training? So briefly, I would say that for us to actually have a skilled workforce, we really need to work with the industry, because we will not be training and we don't know exactly what the industry is. So it is based on industry needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So much content in so much short time. I want to welcome Alex to pick on the next presentation and to take us through that from the industry, from the private sector.
Thank you so much, Faith. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. My name is Alex Monene, fleet mobility expert and the founder of Advanced Mobility. So we are a training and consulting firm in the e-mobility space. So I'll try and be brief. And basically the gap that we are plugging is a skills gap, because technology is driven by people. We have a lot of people focusing on hardware, and I think what we're finding in mobility is that we are leaving the people behind. So that's the gap that Advanced Mobility is plugging in, because we need an industry which has a foundation of people, and then we develop the technology, which is already moving very fast, but the people are being left behind. Then move to the infrastructure, and then we achieve the sustainability goals that we are looking for. So what are the capacity building requirements that the industry would need? So there are 4 main categories. The first one, of course, is the technical training. We need people who are able to fix these vehicles, set up the infrastructure, and do all that that needed to make the electric vehicles work. The second one is the business skills, because e-mobility is a combination of energy and mobility. So that is a synergy which needs a very high level of skill, because we realize that fleet management especially is one of the very technical aspects of e-mobility that most people are having a challenge. And then also just acquiring the right financing models and also the right business models, because there are a lot of business models in e-mobility. Unfortunately, a lot of them will not work, but the few that do will become the big ones in future. The third is policy expertise. We need a policy that supports the industry. So we need the policymakers to be partakers of the industry, not observing on the sideline, so that they're able to be able to understand the kind of policies, frameworks, and standards that we need to develop. And lastly is the consumer education. And I think here is where we have the biggest gap. Because if you go out there in the street, just outside KICC, if you ask people about electric mobility, most people are not aware. If we ask them how long it will take to adopt, there is a lot of EV myths that we need to dispel. And I think I keep saying that we need to move from conferences to the street. So for me, actually, the highlight of this week was the parade we had on Sunday, because that one we were in the street interacting with the normal mwananchi, because they'll not come to this kind of forum. So we need to find ways of going outside Nairobi, outside conferences and hotels to engage with the people. So what levels of capacity building is required? Of course, individuals need to grow their careers in e-mobility. We're also looking at organizations that need to adopt electric mobility, and also to know how it will affect their business, because there are many business models which will be disrupted by electric mobility. So later this week, there is an AfriFuel Expo, and we'll be in that conference telling them that the end of oil is coming. So how are they pivoting their businesses? And then society also needs to understand what e-mobility means. Even for us as a country, our biggest cost is energy, and that energy is oil imports. $600 million every month that we spend on fossil fuel that you could be using on local energy sources. And then what are the future jobs? Because some jobs are disappearing. So other jobs need to replace them, because we are entering a phase change period, similar to when we changed the typewriter to the computer. So the computer could do everything the typewriter could do, but it could also do 99 other things that the typewriter did not do. So people need to understand that e-mobility is more than just vehicles. It is technology, it is energy, it is a combination of a lot of technology channels working together. So some of the jobs we are looking at creating is skilled technicians, engineers. Someone mentioned about skills, right down to basically the whole synergy of people in energy and people in mobility. We are creating jobs in that level, including software, because electric vehicles are run on high level of software, so the battery management systems need to be, we need people to run on that. We need people to do training similar to what advanced mobility does. So what are some of the upcoming events, especially if you're in Kenya, that you'd be able to participate in from our side? So we partner with Stramo Business School to offer a fleet management program. So anyone who is an engineer, a manager, a finance, or whatever background, but needs to pivot into mobility, please don't get into mobility before you understand fleet management. So please join us next month for the program at Stramo Business School. We have our ongoing technical programs. We have a high level of technical training where we disassemble components of an EV. We've trained over 220 people in Kenya so far. Some of them are in this room, and we are looking forward to carrying out another round of that training in July of this year. And then for the business leaders, the directors, the business owners, people who need to understand the business side of e-mobility, we have a one-day program where Advanced Mobility is partnering with AFEMA, which is the Africa Mobility Alliance. We'll be running this in July as well. And we would like to show you how to pivot your business, even if you're not in mobility. We can assure you one thing, that it is going to affect you in one way or another. And lastly, for the people who've done the technical programs with us, the foundation technical course, we want to do a very interesting trip to Harare this year, because that's where our master EV technician is based, the main resource we use for our training. So he has a specialized workshop. So this will be a combination, of course, of an adventure trip and a learning trip, so that we're able to see what is happening in, for example, in Lusaka e-mobility sector. We shall tour Harare and also do further engagement activities at the e-mobility workshop. Our goal really is to enable many more people to get into this sector. And as Advanced Mobility, we also hope that in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have a few master EV technicians in Kenya, so that